Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Arancho, and these are my win-loss picks for the NFC North, the most competitive division in the NFL. Last year, not a single team had a losing record. We begin with last year's division champion. The Chicago Bears have the honors. Their first matchup is a revisit of that Bryce Young trade at the Panthers. A pretty instant dub, even though they don't have DJ Moore anymore. I still think they win pretty easily. Then week 2 is versus the Vikings, and I actually have some confidence that the Minnesota Vikings continue to start off hot. Kevin O'Connell notoriously has a very strong start to the season. So this one might shock you, but I'm calling upset. The home opener is a loss versus Minnesota. Not much tape on Kyler and the Vikings. I think they get shocked. That Brian Flores defense is legit. But week 3, a Monday night matchup versus the Eagles. And this one can go either way, but I'm going to trust the Vic Fangio defense just a little bit more. I think the Eagles can tough it out in primetime while they're still healthy. Saquon will be the difference here. Give me the Eagles. 2 straight losses for Chicago, a 1-3 record. But quickly back to 2-2 versus the Jets is an automatic win. Ben Johnson versus Aaron Glenn. Give me the Jets losing by probably 30 points. At the Packers, though, in week 5, a division rivalry. Ben Johnson enjoys beating Green Bay twice a year. Will it happen this time? I don't think so. I actually think the Packers get some revenge on that playoff loss. They might not have Micah Parsons, but still, I think they'll find a way. If Tucker Kraft is healthy, I think their offense can get the job done. So I'll take another L here, back below 500, but this is where I think it stops. At the Falcons, I think they definitely beat Tua. I don't trust the Falcons defense. Despite Kevin Stefanski moving to town, they're still the Falcons. They're finding a way to choke. So 500 through the first 6 games, but then versus the Patriots, this is a Thursday night game and a true barn burner. Caleb versus Drake May, 2 top 3 picks, and I think I'm going to stick with the home team here. Definitely a toss-up, but I think the travel on a short week will be a factor. I will trust the Chicago Bears, but definitely a close game. I could see it go the opposite direction. That one will be tough, but following that up with a few extra days of rest on the road at Seattle, they get 2 straight games against last year's Super Bowl team. So they can beat the team that lost the Super Bowl, but I don't think they will beat the Seahawks, the reigning Super Bowl champ. The Seahawks defense is just a little too tough. So give me the Seahawks in that one, an L on the road. But following that up with a Sunday night primetime game versus Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers. Baker can keep it close. It'll probably be a shootout, but I do not trust the Bucs defense whatsoever. I don't think Todd Bowles will figure Ben Johnson out, and I'm going to give the Chicago Bears a win heading into the bye week. But after a week of rest, they get Kellen Moore at home. The Saints are a good team, but I don't trust their defense quite yet. Chicago will win versus New Orleans. But then they get the revenge game for the coach at the Lions. Last year was a really tough matchup. They could not beat them either time. They got fucking owned both times, basically. But this one will be closer. I think the Bears will look more impressive. This game is on Thanksgiving, and sometimes the Lions do lose in this spot. But I don't think that'll happen. I think the Lions continue their dominance. I think they get the win, which means a loss for Chicago on the road. The Lions, I think, are still their kryptonite. But versus Jacksonville, following that, could be a Super Bowl preview. I wouldn't be shocked if we saw Caleb Williams versus Trevor Lawrence in the Super Bowl. So this one will be close, but I will ultimately stick with the home team. I think Caleb is a little bit better than T-Law, and I think Ben Johnson is just a little bit better than Liam Cohen at head coach. So it'll come down to which defense steps up, but I think the Bears' run game is a little bit more trustworthy than the Jaguars. So I will take Chicago here, but this is a true toss-up. I'm not fully convinced that's how it's going to go down, but I'll take the home team. Give me the Bears. At the Dolphins, though, is an automatic win. I have no confidence at all in the Dolphins, and that one is pretty easy to call. But at Buffalo, that one's much more competitive. I don't know what the weather will be like, but I still think the Bills in December will find a way. That game's going to be a barn burner, but in a shootout, I'm going to trust Josh Allen. I will take Buffalo. Give me an L for Chicago. But the rematch against all 3 division opponents to close it out, I think they win all 3. I don't think they lose twice to the Packers. If anything, they're more likely to sweep them. So give me a win week 16. That game's on Christmas, So the Bears home crowd will be pretty happy to unwrap that gift. But then versus the Lions, I think they finally get their shit together. I don't think they get embarrassed again. I think Ben Johnson finds a way to beat Dan Campbell. So give me a win in the second matchup. And then at the Vikings, I don't think they get swept either. I think Kyler will lose some steam down the stretch. And despite Brian Flores' defense always being tough, I will take Chicago here. So 3 straight wins to close it out, an 11-6 final record. I'm excited for Chicago, but I don't think they are a lock to win the division like last year. It'll be tough to miss the playoffs, though. I think they're definitely a wild card team at the worst with 11-6. But can any other team beat this record? Let's talk about the Green Bay Packers, who have a very interesting schedule this year, especially given their defense is a major question mark. I'm not quite sure when Micah Parsons is going to play this season, but it sounds like they're not that optimistic he'll be back in the first half of the year. Their bye is in week 11. So the first several weeks are going to be pretty tough without him, and there's a chance that Micah Parsons just isn't back until after the bye. But week 1 at the Vikings, I think Brian Flores' defense is going to be a little too tough. I don't feel great about their run game this year. Josh Jacobs was very ineffective, and without some gimme touchdowns, who knows? Maybe they really crumble down the stretch. But week 1, I think, is a loss on the road at the Vikings. I'm going to trust Kevin O'Connell's early season dominance and take the Vikings at home. But week 2, I believe, is an automatic win at the Jets. Everyone's going to beat the Jets, so don't need to talk about this one. That's a win. But their home opener isn't until week 3, and I actually think it's an upset. I think Bijan Robinson in primetime is a nightmare. And even though it's on Thursday, they're coming off some travel. I'm going to go with the Falcons here. I'm going to call upset, and I don't think the Packers home field crowd is going to be too happy about this one. Give me a loss versus Atlanta. Week 4 at the Buccaneers. I think it's going to be tough again. I don't think their defense can stop anyone. They're going to find themselves in some shootouts, and I'm actually going to take the Buccaneers. Give me Baker Mayfield over Jordan Love. So 1-3 to start the season, and this divisional rivalry will be a prove-it game. I think Matt LaFleur will be on the hot seat if he loses this one, if not already. I don't think that happens, though. I think they do beat the Bears in week 5. They're not losing 4 out of their first 5 games. So a win at home versus Chicago, and then following that up versus the Cowboys. This has historically always been a tough game. This game is in primetime Sunday night, and I just don't quite trust Jordan Love enough. We'll see what happens with Matthew Golden, but maybe their passing game does struggle. So I'm actually going to take the Cowboys in this one. I think the Packers are going to be brutal without Micah Parsons. That defense just doesn't give me enough confidence. So a shootout, I'll take the Cowboys, who at the moment appear to have won that Micah Parsons trade. But following that, I think they're still in some deep shit. At the Lions, I don't have confidence they can beat the Lions even once this year. I will take Detroit. So a brutal start to the season. They're 2-5, and it's not looking good. But here, I think, is where they get Micah Parsons back. Even if they don't, they can probably still just beat Carolina. I don't have much confidence in the Panthers. So another short week. This game is at home, though, so tough travel for Carolina. They lost to the Panthers last year, but it's not happening again. They get their 3rd win versus Bryce Young in this spot. But at the Patriots, even with some extra rest, I still think I trust Drake May a lot more than Jordan Love. I think the Patriots defense might not show up, but I still think A.J. Brown can dominate. So I'm going to take the Pats. Give me another L for Green Bay. It's been a tough stretch up to this point, but versus the Vikings in division, I don't think they get swept. I'm going to give them a win at home versus Minnesota, at least one bright spot before the bye week. But coming off the bye, one of the toughest matchups, if not the toughest matchup all season. This game is on Thanksgiving, and despite the bye week to rest up, that also applies for the Rams. The Rams are also coming off a bye week, and they're hosting this game. So Myles Garrett is going to be a nightmare to guard in this one. I'm going to take the Rams pretty convincingly. It's a pretty tough spot to be in for the Packers. So they're going to be way behind in division, but I think these last 6 games is where they figure things out. I think they're beating the Saints on the road. That's a win. And then I also think they can shock Buffalo in primetime, Jordan Love won't just completely roll over. This one will be tough, but I'm going to give them a W versus the Buffalo Bills. If it was on the road, I'd say L, but I'll take the Packers at home in December. Then they're hosting the Dolphins. I have no confidence in Miami this year, and at that point, I think they're much more likely tanking. So maybe Malik Willis isn't even the quarterback. He might get benched, but whoever's the starter, it's an automatic win for Green Bay. So 3 wins in a row, finally back on track. But like I said, I think they are not that good, and I don't think they sweep the Bears. So I will give them a loss. They beat them the first time at home, but on the road, this game's on Christmas Day, and I think they seal the lack of playoff viability. They will lose at Chicago. Then they have a home game versus the Texans, and maybe the morale is pretty low, but I don't think it really matters. I think they have a better quarterback than the Texans, and I think the weather will be a problem for CJ Stroud. So I'm going to go with the Packers here. They finish off with some fight left in them. I think they get the win in Week 17. But Week 18 versus Detroit, I think the Lions are going to be in contention for the division, and the playoff hopes are really on the line for Detroit. I do not think the Packers will get a single win versus the Lions this year. So 8-9 is my prediction. I legitimately think it's possible that Matt LaFleur gets fired. I do not believe in the Packers this year. I think they will lose the division. And despite being 9-7-1 last year, it wasn't that impressive. And if Micah Parsons can't play the full season, I don't see them racking up many wins to start the year. So rough season for the Green Bay Packers. I think they have a losing record for the first time in a while. But shockingly, the team that finished third last year in this division was the Vikings. Even with J.J. McCarthy and Carson Wentz, the Lions finished fourth. The Vikings were technically better. So they start off the year versus Green Bay. I already mentioned I think they win this game. I think based on the track record, I want to trust Kevin O'Connell in the beginning of the season. He's had historically insane stretches in September. He's not a coach I want to bet against. And I think the Vikings defense is going to look much better than Green Bay's. So give me a win, a second matchup in division immediately after that on the road at Chicago. I think the element of surprise with this new quarterback does factor in a little bit. There's not much tape on Kyler with Jefferson and Addison. And I think I'm going to call upset. Give me a second straight win for the Vikings at Chicago. But at Tampa Bay, I do not trust the Bucs defense whatsoever this year. Going to be a fun one, especially with Godwin healthy. Baker can always keep it interesting, but I think I trust Minnesota a little bit more. I'm going to take 3 straight wins, and it doesn't stop there. An automatic win versus the Dolphins, and then at the Saints. That one will be a little bit closer, but I still trust Minnesota a little bit more. Give me the 5th straight W for Minnesota. They did this with Sam Darnold, and I think it'll be much closer to that than last year with J.J. McCarthy. So roast me in the comments if you want, but I believe the Vikings will start 5-0 once again, like they did with Sam Darnold. But similar to that year, they had an early bye week in Week 6 as well, and sometimes that really kills the momentum. That's been the trend for the Vikings. So following that up versus the Colts, I'm not convinced it works out for them. I think they're going to lose to Shane Steichen and Indianapolis. I think Jonathan Taylor is going to run rampant in this matchup. Similar to the Bijan game last year, I don't think they can stop the run effectively enough to get the win. So give me an L for the Vikings versus the Colts. I do think they will lose in this one, but it's possibly because they're looking ahead to this divisional matchup. I think they will show up at Detroit just like they did last year. Their defense really stepped up. So Brian Flores knows the weaknesses of the Lions, and I think they'll find a way. I trust their defense just enough to get the job done. But then they come back home versus the Buffalo Bills, and I don't want to bet against Josh Allen in an indoor stadium. I don't trust Kyler this much. So back to an L, their second of the year, and I think it's a 2-game losing streak. I think there's a rough spot here in division. They're not going to sweep the Packers, in my opinion. So a win week 1, but a loss in this one. They'll go 1-1 versus Green Bay. But then they go all the way to Mexico City to take on the 49ers. And I do think elevation will be a problem. However, it's going to affect the veteran roster a lot more than the younger roster. That bodes well for Minnesota. And if you look at the history of these two teams, Minnesota owns San Francisco. A lot of those wins are in Minnesota, though. So because it's a neutral field, it's a true toss-up. However, I think I just trust the health of Minnesota down the stretch. The Niners and the substation are going to be a problem. So I'll take the Vikings here in primetime in Mexico City. I think they get the win. However, following that, I think the altitude is going to lead to some fatigue. The trip back home is not going to be very fun. So I think they're going to get shocked by the Falcons. Just like last year, Bijan Robinson going to run all over them. And if you have an elite running back, it can be problematic for the Vikings. So an L versus the Falcons, even at home, I think they lose. And then this might be a shocker, but I think they also lose at home versus Carolina. That Panthers defense is tough. And at this point in the year, I think Kyler's going to start to look vulnerable. Now that the league has film on him, it's just not the same equation. And I don't want to full fade the Carolina Panthers. So battle of the short quarterbacks, I'll take Bryce Young over Kyler Murray. But then they travel at the New England Patriots. This game will be interesting, but I'm going to trust Drake May a little bit more than Kyler. I think with bad weather being a definite chance in this one, I don't expect Kyler to overcome the wind or the cold. He never plays well outdoors in December. So I'll take the Patriots in Foxborough. The home team gets the win, an L for the Vikings. They're third in a row. That's 5 in the last 6 games. But then I think they figure things out. They come back home versus the Lions. I actually think they can sweep Detroit. I will give them a win here versus Detroit. I know the Lions have an elite offense, but I just don't trust their defense. And I think Brian Flores has figured them out. If you started Gibbs last year in the fantasy championship, you know what I'm talking about. The Lions shit the bed. And I think the Vikings will have their number. So I'm trusting Brian Flores, a sweep of Detroit. Maybe I'm a little too bold with that prediction, but I do believe it can happen. Then they host the Commanders, and I don't trust the Commanders' defense whatsoever either. I think they get another win. They're 9th of the year, but then they're at the Jets, and that should be a very easy win. If anything, that's a blowout, and there's no chance in hell. I'm taking Geno Smith, but they're not going to get to 11 wins. I think they close it out with just a 10-7 record. I'm giving them a loss versus Chicago. They beat them in week 2, but they're not going to sweep them in division. The Vikings are competitive. I think they're better than people give them credit for, but I think 10-7 is the record this year. I believe they are a playoff team. I actually have some faith in Kyler Murray, but maybe I'm a little too crazy. I probably get some pushback in the comments on at least those Lions games. I think odds are y'all don't trust me for the sweep. But lastly, we're going to talk about the Detroit Lions, who with a 4th place schedule have one of the easiest matchup schedules you can ask for. I feel extremely confident in Detroit getting back to the playoffs this year. Week 1 home opener is actually maybe a bit tougher than you might think. Versus the New Orleans Saints, I think will be a shootout, but I'm going to trust the home team. Definitely give me Detroit. Off last year's season, they come out swinging. They beat the Saints, but the game is closer than you expect. At Buffalo, though, in week 2, this game is on Thursday night, and I think the travel at this stage of the season isn't something to worry too much about, but I think I just trust Josh Allen a lot at home. I'm going to give the Bills the win, but I wouldn't be that shocked if the Lions do get the job done and win themselves. But a 1-1 start followed by 3 straight wins, I have no confidence that either of these next 3 teams can beat them. Definitely not the Jets. Aaron Glenn going to get humbled big time in this one. If he hasn't already been humbled, it'll definitely happen. So win number 2 at the Panthers. I have no confidence in Bryce Young. This game is a primetime matchup. The Lions will attempt to hang 50 if they can. They are winning that one by blowout. Same goes for the following matchup at Arizona. That game's indoors, and it's the Drew Petzing revenge game. I have no confidence in the Cardinals' offense. There's no way they can hang with Detroit. But off the bye with extra rest, I think they have the advantage versus the Packers. I'm still not expecting Micah Parsons back, and I have no faith in the Packers defense. So if you watch the whole video, you already know I'm taking the Lions in this one. I don't think it'll be close whatsoever. But versus the Vikings in week 7, I mentioned it. I worry about this matchup for them. Brian Flores figured out their offense last season, and even though it's at home, I still have some confidence in the Vikings. Give me a loss for Detroit. I think the trend of them losing 2 games in a row, that never happening, will repeat. I trust Dan Campbell in that regard to keep the good vibes rolling. They're not losing on the road at the Dolphins, but off the Dolphins game, I imagine they just travel to Germany. This game is going to be in Munich. They're hosting the New England Patriots, but I don't think travel is going to be a big problem. So I will take Detroit, I think, in this unique environment, neutral field. I'm going to take Jared Goff and the Lions. I think in primetime, they always show up, and I think they'll play very well against New England. A close game, but I'm going to trust Detroit in this matchup. But then they come home without the bye off of that Munich, Germany game. I'm a little bit worried about fatigue setting in, and historically, the Bucs have definitely given the Lions some problems. So maybe some injuries on defense start to pile up. Their defense is pretty bad to begin with. I think Baker will go toe-to-toe, and this will be a back-and-forth shootout. I'm going to take the Bucs, though. They have had the Lions' number. I'm going to trust Baker Mayfield one more time. But then they're hosting Chicago, and I don't think they lose 2 in a row. They've had the Bears' number, and they've been winning by blowout against Caleb Williams. So I don't know if that'll happen again, but off the loss, give me a win versus Chicago in Week 12. Then they go on the road at the Falcons. Bijan versus Gibbs will be interesting, and I just don't trust their defense. I actually think, just like last year, they're going to find some problems. They're going to go 1 loss, 1 win, and kind of vice versa, kind of ping pong between the two. I'm actually going to call upset here. I'm going to take the Falcons at home. I think the Falcons offense will start to figure some things out, and I just don't trust the Lions defense. So give me a loss. However, they will beat the Titans. I don't trust Cam Ward enough. And even though Robert Saleh is a good defensive coach, like I said, they're not losing 2 in a row. They will beat Cam Ward. But following that, they go on the road at Minnesota, and I think they get swept. I think the Brian Flores defense is legit, and I don't think they have an answer to stop Justin Jefferson in the Vikings stadium. It's a very tough environment to play. So I'm going to take a loss here, but I think they follow that up with a win. This is a Monday night game versus Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterbo, and there's a chance that neither of them are healthy at this stage of the season. So they will beat the Giants. I don't fear the Giants defense very much. I think their run defense is still really bad. So Gibbs going to go nuclear in that one. And then Week 17 at Chicago, I think this is finally where Ben Johnson figures things out. I don't think they're going to sweep the Bears like they did last season. So an L once again. However, the final week of the season at Green Bay, I don't trust the Packers. I'm going to take the Lions yet again. So after the bye, there's only 1 2-game win streak, but yet again, Dan Campbell does not lose 2 games in a row. And it's a pretty respectable record, 11-6 in, like I said, the most competitive division in football. So that is my prediction in this division. I have the Lions going 11-6, the Chicago Bears also at 11-6, the Vikings at 10-7, and the Green Bay Packers at 8-9. The Lions versus Bears, I'm not 100% sure which one gets the tiebreaker. I believe the strength of schedule favors the Bears, but I think the teams that they've beat in common might actually favor the Lions. So I believe, based on all my predictions, the Lions will win the division at 11-6. I used to have them at like 13-4. When the schedule dropped, I had much more confidence in them. But the more I think about it, I just don't trust their defense enough. I think they go 11-6. Still get the home field in the playoffs, but that's not a lock with the tie with Chicago. So that's how I see this NFC North division shaking out. I believe the Lions will win, and the Packers will miss the playoffs. The Vikings, though, I think they're the 7 seed in the NFC. But the Bears definitely are a playoff team, no doubt about it. They're one of the only teams I think can actually win the Super Bowl. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe for more content. We'll be picking every single win-loss record for all 32 teams. Our next division is the AFC West. Look out for that. I'll see you next time. My name is Adam Riancho. Thanks for watching. Nice and blunt.